Great, okay. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our listeners and viewers to Critical Thinking Live, Friends of Europe's offering where we bring you key personalities to talk about subjects of importance or timely or things which are happening which we want to explain and perhaps unpack a little bit more in detail. Today is no different, and it's great to have two significant individuals that are involved in development aid in various parts of the world. We have here Jean Vavetta from the Belgian Development Agency as CEO of Enabel, and we also have Thorsten, who's the chairman of the board of GIZ, one of the largest development agencies in Europe. And today we're going to discuss wither development aid. Most of you may not be aware, but actually there's a creeping movement of reduction that's happening in national budgets for overseas development aid. So let me just quote a few. In 2023, the government in Germany announced cuts of around 500 million in its ODA, and there's more to come. France, in its 2024 budget, saw a decrease compared to previous projections, signaling a downward fall of 0.7 from its target. We're seeing quite significant, we're talking about hundreds of millions of euros in reduction. We've had a similar situation in Sweden, where we've had about at least a 30% reduction in its budget. Italy's the same, and Denmark, and the Netherlands, and so on. We are seeing the steady creep of reduction of development aid, or overseas development aid, if you want to call it that, and international development is suddenly becoming something which is perhaps being seen as the easy cut to make in national budgets at a time when budgets are tight. We know what the impact of what COVID is still having on national governments. We also know that the energy crisis and the current war that's happening in Ukraine are all having an impact on how governments are steering their budgets when they have the highest public debt in history, highest public debt in history. So in that context, we want to talk to you and talk to these two chaps about overseas development and what's happening. So I'm going to turn to Jean. Jean, tell me a little bit about your reaction to what's going on, because you're seeing it up front and center, and you're speaking also to other CEOs of development agencies across Europe. What's the mood?
But the mood is that we need to defend and stand for what we believe in. I think one of the issues is that national governments often see development aid as charity. And what we say is that it's more an investment. And instead of when you see charity, it's easy to cut. And indeed, the public in Belgium or in other countries might not be aware of the impact it can have. But when you see that as an investment, and you can demonstrate the return on investment for both the partner countries where we work, but also for Europe, then you change the narrative. And I think it's the dialogue we want to have now with our policymakers, is how we can work with them to understand that it is an investment and not charity.
But that's great, but are you genuinely concerned that there is a movement of huge reductions in development aid happening right now? And is that simply about the priority given to the issue?
Yeah. Yes, I'm concerned because it's a paradox. While the rest of the world, and China in particular, but also other countries like Saudi Arabia, the Middle East countries, South Korea, Japan, are seeing that they need to increase their external role, and especially towards Africa, and also the US, which is keeping a large budget towards Africa. Europe, while Africa is our neighbor and our obvious partner, only 12 kilometers between Europe and Africa, it seems that we are decreasing our investment in the continent. So it's a paradox. While I think we should open up and, in a way, invest in our assets and our proximity, we are in a way disinvesting while others are investing. So it's a paradox.
Okay, Jean, thank you very much. I'm going to come to you, Thorsten. Thank you very much for joining us also. Germany obviously has been in the eye of the storm for many, many reasons. We've had, the change in defense budgets, for example. You've had the huge kind of stalling, if you like, because of the debt in Germany of budgets, even to your own agency and others. So from your perspective, Thorsten, what do you think is going on? What are you witnessing in the context of how overseas development aid or international development is being viewed domestically in Germany?
Yeah, thanks a lot, firstly, for your question. And what we see is two main challenges. Not only budget cuts in Germany, we have also a discussion about the legitimization of development policy And that means, what is the role of development policy in the context of the whole field of policy? And one main word is pointed out very often in this discussion, and that is the word of interests. What is our interest in development policy? And that is really important. And I will start especially exactly with this word. And what I want to underline at the beginning is the first step is to be clear and aware of the relevance of functional international agreements for intra-European and German development, and to explain them to the public. There is a lot of discussions about interest in these days, and whether I want to say pointedly, our European interest is peace and security. There is no peace and security without international engagement. Our European interest is the protection of global goods, such as climate protection, and there will be no climate protection without international commitment. Our European interest is prosperity and sustainable growth. There will be no prosperity and sustainable growth without international commitment. And then we have to do a second step to understand that our interests can only be achieved in partnerships. And the first step after recognizing and explaining is to derive consequences from it, consequences for policies and for budget design.
Excellent. I mean, I think you've set out in very clear terms why it's important for us to think, I suppose, in broader terms about the impact of development aid, but also in international development policy per se, and the fact that actually it's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street. But what's your sense, Thorsten, of, given what you've heard from the new or the new mandate? So Ursula von der Leyen, in her speeches so far, what's your sense? Do you have a sense of confidence that what you're saying, what you just said now very eloquently about the importance of the kind of interest that we have, which is both reciprocal and mutual, are you hearing that in anything from the speeches of the President of the Commission, or from anything you're hearing in terms of what they're saying about the new mandate's priorities? And I'll come to you, Jean, about that too. What's your view, Thorsten?
My view is that I see ongoing discussion, and if in discussions I see more and more clearness about this perspective of interests, and to integrate interests in a whole picture. What are the goals for development, not only for Germany and the European Union, and what is the need if we discuss development for Europe and Germany in international cooperations. But the difficulty or the challenge is that in the past, we are not often discuss interests, and for that, it need time to get a new commitment in societies about the role and the status for development policy. But the role for us as development agencies is to be really clear that we have a need, and it means at the end different answers and instruments in different contexts. Development policy is not development policy. If we discuss development policy in fragile contexts, the instruments and needs are totally different to the needs and to the needs in non-fragile contexts.
Okay, let's come back to that, because there's a sophistication you just articulated there, which I don't think is readily understood out there in the policy community, outside of your development bubble, if I can call it that, with all due respect. And I'm not sure it's understood in the Commission. Give me your take on, as Thorsten has, about what are the signals you're witnessing or listening to or hearing about the demise or the future of development aid and development policy?
But first of all, I would say I agree with Thorsten that we need different instruments, different according to the context, and we cannot say one policy for all. I think that's very important what Thorsten said. What I hear in the speech, I think if you look at the declaration of the President of the Commission, there is a clear willingness to engage in international partnership. It's mentioned in our policy notes. There is the Global Gateway program that the EU is promoting, which is a strong will for investment towards Africa. What I don't see enough is the link between the different policy elements. And what an example of that is, for example, the Draghi report. Draghi says Europe needs to be more competitive, needs to reinvest notably in critical raw material. But if you read the Draghi report, Africa is only mentioned once or twice, no more. But if you want critical raw material and to have a strategic role in critical raw material, that's in Africa. So you need to have also a development policy, because you cannot just go in Africa and consider your partner countries as suppliers. You need to have a holistic approach, also including vocational training, including legislation, including education, including health. You need to have your investment strategy coupled with a development strategy. And for me, that's what makes Europe strong vis-à-vis other partners if we come with this holistic approach. What Europe is strong at, social model, regional integration. And that's what we should come with our partners outside of the world. Not try to copy other countries, but come with our own assets. So I think the will is there, but we need to refine maybe the strategies and how it is divided between different commissioners, because that will be an issue now with the new commission. You have a commissioner for the Mediterranean, you have a commissioner for international partnership, you have a commissioner for emergency situations, you have the high representative. How the whole thing will articulate, and to come back on Thorsten's point, indeed, fragile context, where do they fit? Humanitarian or international partnership, or in between? Who is in charge? What is the policy? What are the instruments? So, and there we are ready as development agencies to bring our ideas, our experience, our assets, Thorsten and I, and our two agencies, is people on the ground and expertise and experience.
But absolutely well said. But the reality is, if the politicians and those in power, if I can call it that, don't see you as relevant to some of those issues, how do you get through the door? I mean, for me, it's clear when you talk about the Draghi report. Is your view that he's basically missed the point of international development? Because he can talk about what we need as being competitive, but to not recognize the potential of Africa and for Europe in terms of economic growth and competitiveness, he's missed the point, hasn't he?
I wouldn't dare to say missed the point. I think his report was to speak about competitiveness in Europe, but no is the answer to the report. And the answer to the report must include international cooperation. Just the fact that Europe will shrink, 450 million to 300 million, speaks about manpower. You need African manpower, so you need your migration strategy to be included. If you speak about innovation, the same. Where the innovation will come, I'm convinced that the next innovations will come from Africa, because the context is fertile, because of the young population. So I don't think Draghi missed the point. Basically, Draghi made an alarming report, and now it's us to provide an answer to the report, and part of the answer is the international cooperation.
Thorsten, I'd like to ask you whether the work you do, you are one of the largest development agencies in Europe. You are traveling across the world continually, and you're seeing the impact you're having on the ground with the major projects and programs you fund, both in states in Africa, fragile states, or not so fragile states, but there's a whole diversity in which you invest or fund, for example. My question is, are other partners or other policy communities like defense, security, are they seeing you as relevant to their work? Do they see the fact that what you do creates the conditions for peace? Because we know that you are relevant. We in this community, this small community, we know you are. But are the players that do defense, security, or even investment policy understand the importance of you?
Yeah, exactly. What is the main impact of our work? We are not only in the field of project implementation, we are very relevant with our work for other fields, especially for investments of the private sector, or also for stability and peace. So we are in in very strong discussions with other actors outside of the traditional field of development policy. And it's clear that the interdependence between different fields is it's huge, and it's clear that without development policy, some of the goals of the European Union or member states of the European Union are not able to get them. There is a clear interdependence between development policy and our fields. And one of our challenges and also chances is to underline more in the future that we see this impact for the success of investment policy or also security. I said last year, as one key message of our annual report, peace needs development.
I agree with you, but if you were to, we are currently about less than half a mile away from the Commission, the Parliament, and the way that the Commission is being reconfigured, let's say, would not suggest that they get that point, because you have DG INTPA, you have EAS, you have NEAR, you have a whole range of different Director Generals, and they don't necessarily think in the round in the way that you are. So let's turn to you two as agencies. I would like to ask you, what are you going to do now differently to change the narrative so that people like Ursula von der Leyen and the new, let's say the defense chief, Kaja Kallas, and others get the importance of you? I'm going to turn to you first.
Yeah, but I think it's an excellent question, and I agree with Thorsten. We are extremely relevant, but we are not always seen as relevant. So what we need to do is reach out, and we do it. For example, tomorrow we invite members of the parliament to speak about fragility. We need also to be together. I think we cannot work in an isolated way. That's why GIZ Enabel, we work more and more closely, but also with other agencies, stronger together. It's not just a slogan, but it's true.
Is France in there, for example,
Yeah,
given how Macron is driving so much of the political community conversation? Do the French, do your French brothers and sisters get this?
Yeah, we have a network, the practitioners of 24 different agencies. So we are united and more speaking at the CEO level to exchange on our views. But what I think we need to change is the way we speak. I think one of the mistakes development cooperation has done in the past is to speak with jargon, to speak in a bubble. And in a way, we need to decluster development cooperation from its own world and to open up. And for that, in Belgium, for example, we have a strategy from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs called the comprehensive approach. And the idea is to unite defense, police, development, global health, environment, climate. And there is a policy paper at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and now we are working with the ministry to see how that can be better live. What Enabel we have done, 60 public cooperation agreement with ministries at the federal level, but also regional level, universities, research centers, and that allows us in Belgium to speak with different stakeholders to convince them on the relevance of international development. So my job is as much, I would say, in my partner countries as in Belgium and Europe. So we need to reach out, decluster, and speak a language that everybody understands. So if you speak with defense, speak the defense language, not our language.
Thorsten, would you agree? What about what will you do? What are you doing given this new mandate is upon us? We know, I stated at the beginning of this interview, the cuts, they are very significant. And, are people getting the importance of what you do? So what will you do to change the narrative?
Yeah, thanks. And I agree. But I will also underline that is a difficult question for GIZ because GIZ is a federal company, and so we are not a political actor. And so our opportunities are limited. But what we can do and what we do is, first, we should relate impact and success on the one hand to personal experience on the other. This means a different form of communication, but it's a very important point. we need a different form of communication, in particular understandable language and not expert language. Expert language is a problem because it makes a disconnect to discussions in society. So we need another form of communication that needs at the beginning another understanding of our work. And secondly, there needs to be a change from the previous logic and work in projects towards so-called, in our language, integrated solution. And this means that the connection between the project must become clearer, between the projects must become clearer, to see what we see interactivity between different projects to solve a huger problem or challenge. And that is the way we fought for the future, and to underline more the impact and success of our work.
I want to kind of come to that point about how do you the point of re-narrating or creating a new narrative. But communication is key to this. And I think, let me take Africa. Let's just take Africa for a moment, because, very close to us, a continent that, has been, let's say, exploited over many decades and centuries. We now have hopefully a different framework of engagement with Africa, yet the old kind of ticks and flicks of relationships just pop back up. And, you speak to African leaders who say, we begin to trust, and suddenly it comes back that, our debt is higher than what we get in aid. The way in which we're consulted is still a one-way street rather than a sense of mutuality and independence. So there's something about the communication of what you do that continues to not, I suppose, change the way in which Africa feels about who it is and what it is to Europe. Can you just say a little bit about your reaction to that?
But I think there is a difference of debate between what you hear in Africa and what you hear here in Brussels, or what you hear with the diaspora. When I traveled in Africa, I see that organizations like GIZ and Enabel are very well perceived. But indeed, there is a risk that the perception is still that we come and say what to do, and we are too, in a way, paternalist. So what we do to change that, I think, is the leadership. I think the leadership of organizations is to be more diverse. So we need to have more African talent within the management of organization at one point, even in the board, in the decision making. So it's more like a mutual investment, a mutual understanding, rather than a European agency investing in Africa. That's what we did at Enable. We have a people and talent director from Senegal, and I can already see the impact it has on the perception that we have vis-à-vis African leaders. More and more of our project leaders are also from the African continent. We have an increasing mobility between countries. So we would recruit a talent from Uganda that would work in Burkina Faso, or a talent from Tanzania that would move to Congo. So it's a kind of mobility, and that's also our added value for African countries, is the link between countries. If we can replicate something that worked well in Benin, in Mozambique, good for, and that's what our partners are expecting. So what I see is they see our role in the kind of regional integration within Africa as growing. And so, yeah, it's a different type of partnership, less global south, global north, but much more partnership between countries with our role as a spark. For Enable, I would use the word as an enabler to facilitate change, more than as a development cooperation. The term development cooperation should also change. That's what I believe.
I agree totally. And I said at the beginning that partnership is really relevant. And what we see is that partnership is in a change. We see new opportunities and sometimes challenges. Yeah, if you have a huge field of partnership, you can see different interests also from our partners, and we have to work with it and different views, and that means also the perspective in a company, and for our strategy building processes, and also in work with the partners. And that is one of, I would say, success factors for GIZ in our work. We are very close to partners in many countries. So we have a long-term experience in many of our partner countries, and for that we have also a chance to work very strong and very effectful with our partners.
Yeah. If I can build on what Thorsten said about the relevance and how to speak to policymakers, one thing that I notice is that sometimes I feel we are underused. Our network in Africa and our partners, Enabel only in Congo is 500 people. And I see GIZ in many countries is also much bigger sometimes. Not only in the capital city, but also in the provinces. So the knowledge we have of the context, it's an asset that should be better used. We have Enabel is in Congo. It's not only Kinshasa. It's the Sud Ubangi. It's the Kasai. It's the Katanga, and with Congolese colleagues that know what's happening, and that should also be better used. And so for that, I really plea for a more integrated approach, as Thorsten was mentioning.
Absolutely. In terms of the narrative, let's as we kind of come to a conclusion of this interesting discussion that we're just having, you've both referred to the need to communicate what you do differently and better, and the fact that perhaps the language needs to change about what it represents. So Thorsten, can I just ask you first, in the community that you sit, you've got these other CEOs across Europe, do they get this point? But what do you think needs to happen to make sure that ordinary citizens, if we can call it, it sounds rather patronizing, that people in Germany understand the value of overseas development aid, and that actually it will benefit the prosperity and the peace and the stability of the nation as much as it does overseas? What do you think needs to happen? What would you do?
I'm a former politician, and if I had difficult questions or challenges to communicate, I tested to my daughters, and I discussed with them. And if my 17 years old youngest daughter could follow me, then my communication is successful, because we are in a so intensive policy field, and we are very fast in our discussions. We have our own language in our policy sector, and that is a main problem. People outside the sector couldn't understand what we do. So it is an important need. And what I see is a huge commitment. If we discuss, Jean, in our practitioners network, there is a strong commitment, but communication must be better in the future. It's one of the main factors. Without success and impact is one of the main factors to be successful and get more acceptance and understanding for our work.
Absolutely. Fine words, Thorsten, but I'm going to challenge you a bit further. In a Germany that's witnessed the highest rise, if you in volume and let's say voting to the right, you know that's, it's unsettled everybody in Europe. It's unsettled those who are thinking about the future of Europe. And you can see that those who are struggling to pay their bills or feel they can't get a foothold in the housing ladder, or feel that their life chances are poor, and they have GIZ putting hundreds and millions into places which they feel, actually, why do they deserve it more than I do? How do you deal with that, Thorsten?
Yeah, that is a huge challenge, and I have in my private field a lot of discussions like this. Because I know a lot of people who have problems, and there is sometimes a really difficult and aggressive discussion. But I would say at the end, very often, I am able to get and form a new understanding because I discuss more and more about interests. And it's clear for Germany. Germany is a nation for export. Our economic is based on export. Every second euro we have in Germany is based on export. So we have a need for our progress in functionable international relations. And that is a point people understand very well, that it's a need. There is, the consequence isn't, in many discussions, an understanding for everything what we do, but the main understanding that functional international relations and cooperation is a need that I got.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you?
I think it's an excellent point.
You have no government at the moment in Belgium. You can see there's been a rise in the right also. And, you know, there's the same cost of living crisis here as elsewhere. How are you responding to that in terms of making sure that people are seeing the value of what you do?
But I agree with Thorsten saying that we need it more than they need. And you did hear at Friends of Europe an excellent presentation of a report called Why Europe Needs Africa. And there are many arguments. But what I concretely do, and I agree with Thorsten, focus on the youth, the next generation. So citizenship education, global citizenship education is very important. And what we have done at Enable is change the focus group. We used to work with mainly, I would say, well-off schools and kids who were already in school, so was already well off. So here we decided to target the out-of-school children in Belgium to listen to what it means to them. And you would be amazed, but when you explain to young people the importance of international cooperation and you show them how they can get valued for that, then it works. And I have an experience before. I was working for Handicap International, which is an NGO, and we were doing fundraising. And you would be amazed, the one donating the most proportionally to their revenues are poor people.
Yes.
Because they feel that they are in difficult situations in Belgium, but they know that there are people in more difficult situations somewhere else in there. And most of the migrant communities are the ones who donate proportionally to their revenue more than rich people. And when you understand that, then you can make them understand why we do these investments. I would challenge you, but I think sometimes the challenge is more with the well-off people that want to preserve their acquis, what they already have, more than the vulnerable communities.
No, indeed, indeed. But I suppose that those who are spreading dis and misinformation, who are from the middle classes, are preying on the vulnerabilities of those who are poor. We've seen that in Germany, we've seen that here, we're seeing it all in the UK, everywhere. And that's what concerns me. But let me now conclude this conversation. It's very interesting, we could go on for a long time. I want to go back to the fundamental concept of overseas development aid. You know, we know it's been hatched at a time, 50s, 60s, and then it's been developed further in the 70s. OECD has been involved, UN's been involved. It came out at a time that's very different to our time now. And there was this sense of it serves a purpose both for the originating country, but it's very much seen as aid. It was out there to support the poor people in third world countries. There's that mentality sometimes still there to a certain extent, but I would, out of respect to you and your colleagues, I know a lot of you have worked really hard to change that way of thinking, but also way of working. But as we are here in 2024, when this concept is over 60 to 70 years old, is it not ripe for change? So I want to ask you both, what do you think needs to happen to redefine overseas development aid to be fit for the future, to last us for the remainder of this century, when we know the century in which it was born has nothing to do with where we find ourselves right now. So I'll start with you, Jean.
It's an excellent question and the key question. I think we should get rid of ODA as it is conceived right now. We should stop thinking of the global south versus the global north. I think when we speak about the global south, we are shooting in our own feet because it's like saying we are still different compared to the rest of the world. And the country that understood that very well is China. China says we are part of the global south, we are not as you are, we are different. So Europe, by continuing this narrative, in a way for me, is shooting in its own feet. What we need to do is to start from our common challenge. Thorsten spoke about common goods. I agree, global public goods, global health, and we saw it with the pandemic. Climate, if Africa is developing their fossil fuel as much as we have done here in Europe or in the US, the whole planet disappears. So it's our interest to invest in climate change and transition in green hydrogen in Africa to avoid that they use the same polluting technologies as we have done. So we need to start our common challenge, climate, security, peace, demography. We need to solve those issues together, consider it as an investment, not as an aid, so we should not use the terminology aid. And I hope there will be in Sevilla in Spain next year in June, a big summit on the future of international development financing. That new ideas will be put on the table, but I believe climate will be one of the key new instruments to fund international cooperation because it's a common issue. I believe inequality will be another one because you see growing inequalities not only between countries, but within countries. And that's also something we need to collectively tackle. So yeah, changing of narrative, starting from global challenge and not anymore development aid.
Thank you. Thorsten, you came up with that notion of global common goods. Is that the description and the direction of travel in how we rethink and reshape overseas development aid?
I would say it's a very important aspect, but not the only one. I will explain it. But firstly, I want to say that I agree totally with the comment of Jean. I said at the beginning, peace and security is our interest. Global goods are our interests, and also economic growth, sustainable growth is our interest. And at the end, I would say the key is partnership. Partnership is the focus for development policy in the future. And for us at GIZ, we are not an actor for humanitarian aid. We are an agency for development. And that means activities in many fields. But the key is partnership. That is the new perspective for development policy in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's hope people get that. I mean, for us as a think tank, for some time, we've been advocating the need to move from an aid mindset to an investment mindset. And that's why we wanted to have this conversation with both of you, because I think it's important that people that run agencies like you do are important characters and, I suppose, navigators of a new territory. And I hope that you and your colleagues in your network see the importance and the value to not prevaricate. It feels there's a sense of urgency of time to really do what you both are saying, actually, both domestically but also across Europe, so that your voice can be heard at the top table of the Commission, so that they see the value of your infrastructure, your people on the ground, and the fact that you're a partner for change and social progress, as opposed to an aid agency. Let's see. Thank you both very much for your time, and we wish you well in the coming weeks and on your travels. As I know both of you have been to the most troubled places in the world, and I know your staff have also had to deal with those troubling times. But we wish you both well, and we wish you good luck in the future. Those of you who've been listening, tell us your views. Let us know what you think about this agenda, whether you disagree or agree. But for one thing, let's continue the debate, and let's hope that we are able to redefine the narrative of aid to investment and think about global common goods, peace and security as partnering issues for both these agencies, but also for Europe and the rest of the world. Thank you very much and look forward to seeing you again.